Hi, everyone. Thanks for stopping by Inside the Plank, brought to you by Jeep. We have a jam-packed show for you tonight for Week 6 of the Plank. I'm John Sabol. Tom Korun will be joining us any minute now. He's arriving back from downtown Tampa over at Amalie Arena, previewing the Lightning season opener, so he'll be joining us here any minute now. Let me set the stage for you guys today in this big jam-packed show for you. As always, Tampa Bay Times beat reporter for the Buccaneers, Greg Auman, will be joining us, as well as Aaron Wilson from the Baltimore Sun, the Ravens insider. And look who it is. Tom Korun is just coming in, as I just said that. Come on in, Tommy boy.
Hi, I'm coming in.
And then Derek Fournier, you may know him as one of the Buccaneers' best fans around here. He has whatthebuck.com, or .net rather, has been a super fan as Tom Korun getting settled in here. Better late than ever, TK.
It is better late than ever. I get my mic. Yeah, I'll tell you, it's an exciting night here in Tampa.
Exciting night. Get the Lightning. Now we got the Buccaneers. Hopefully going to come back and go ahead and get a win this weekend against the Ravens. Also, Matt McGuire, our fantasy segment later on in the show, will be telling you who to sit, who to stay, who to pick up, as maybe your fantasy team needs some points. I know mine does this week. But let me set the stage here for you and how to get in touch with us. We're going to be taking your calls and tweets all evening here, 813-367-0171. Feel free to tweet at us, too. You see Tom's, you see my Twitter handle there as well, using the hashtag #ThePlank. We'll be taking your calls all night long, 813-367-0171, right here on The Plank. But first, before we get going and talking about previewing this big Ravens game, TK, we're going to talk a little bit about what happened with the Saints. And the Bucs just pretty much teased us of almost pulling out that win.
Yeah, I went back and I watched the game again last night. And what really disappointed me was their start. Glennon really did a good job of delivering the football. And Safarian Jenkins had a couple of drops. Vincent Jackson had a couple of drops. They actually had a drive there where they could have put points on the board. They might have been able to put 7, which could have been the difference in that football game. They wouldn't have had to go to overtime. But because they had a slow start, and then, of course, the multitude of penalties and let's just add it on and on and on, they gave that game to New Orleans. They were the better football team.
The penalties killed the Buccaneers. 15 penalties, the most since 2003. 113 yards. That's just not going to get it done. Of course, we'll hear more about that game coming up here in just a little bit. But let's bring in our Plank Report, brought to you by Jeep, with Buccaneers beat writer Greg Auman with the Tampa Bay Times. And we'll get this started and recap on the Saints game before we get started about the Ravens. So let's talk about the Saints game with Greg Auman. Greg, how you doing? All right, looks like we're going to have Greg here in just a little bit here. But before we get talking about Greg, in talking about what went wrong, you talked about what you did see from watching the game. Mm-hmm. You did see some positive things with Mike Glennon.
I did see positive things. I know it's very difficult to try and to draw the positives out of there. I know Lovey's trying to draw the positives out of there. But in the National Football League, we know it, folks. You're graded on wins and losses, and if you lose the football game, no matter what you've done in that 60 minutes, you still lost the football game. But this is very similar. I think we're all trying to draw correlations to the Tony Dungy year when his team took, maybe 6 or 7 games before they actually got it together. And you could tell during the course of that time, especially towards the end of that season, that there was going to be a pretty good football team coming down the pike. And right now, I would say, from what I saw against New Orleans and the fact that I believe Mason Foster's coming back, that's going to help the defense. Gerald McCoy's got another week with his hand. Now he's going to be able to engage. I think he still had a problem engaging on a defensive line.
Right.
And if he can't engage, well, you saw what happened. No pressure. 57 times breezed through the football, and not once was he sacked.
That's incredible. There only was 1 sack in that game. Of course, it happened on the Buccaneers safety with Mike Glennon. Mason Foster, you just mentioned him. He is back to full participation for the second day in a row as the Buccaneers injury report came out this afternoon, which should definitely help them out. Another guy that we look at the injury reports, we'll talk with Greg Auman here in just a little bit about the latest. We're going to talk about Vincent Jackson with his rib injury. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on with Jonathan Banks with his neck. I know we all know about how he's been playing this year. You look at some other positive things about that game. The Bucs did have an 11-point lead in the fourth quarter.
That's huge. That's huge.
But even though they blew it, but that's still positive, TK, that they built the lead and they had some offense in it.
It's positive they built the lead, and it's really bad that they lost the football game. So, well, let's bring Greg Auman in from the Tampa Bay Times Buccaneer beat reporter. Greg, as always, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you?
We're doing great. Of course, this is the Plank Report brought to you by Jeep. And tell us, again, I got to ask you, what is the demeanor of this football team this week as you've talked to the guys in the locker room?
I think it's picked up. I think they know they had a chance to win the game here on Sunday and just couldn't close it out. I mean, that's a big difference from where things were 2 weeks earlier against the Falcons. So I think they have a team that has 4 games they can compete in. They just haven't been able to pull out wins and make the most out of just over one of the 4. So right now it's just a matter of trying to make better use of their opportunities and close things out differently if they can get in this position again.
Greg, when we look back at that game, and TK were just talking a little bit about the positive and negatives of it. What did you take from that game? A big positive and a big negative going into this Ravens game at home here.
Well, I think the offense has come a long way. I think to see the passing game improve as much as it has, you had a lot of missed opportunities on both sides of the ball, but they still scored 31 points. I think you had the help with the pick 6 there. But this offense has come a long way in the last 2 weeks. The defense, I think you're still seeing them missing out some of the injuries they have. So it's hard to evaluate them as a whole. But this is a team that has put themselves in position to win. I just don't think they know how to win close games yet.
And that's one of the things, Greg, that I'm actually rather surprised at. I know that they have a number of players here on this football team that are new to the system. In fact, everybody would be new to the system with Lovey, coming in his first year. But I would think these guys would be past that. I mean, these guys have won before. They've got, they brought in players that have won before. I don't know what it's going to take, but to lose that football game as they did against New Orleans, I would have to say that Levy's got to be scratching his head, wondering, what in the world happened in that final 15 minutes.
Right. To be up, like you said, to be up by 11 points with 10 minutes to play, you have to trust your defense at that point. You have to feel like you can close it out. And they just weren't able to do that. I think this was a defense that got tired at the end of the game very clearly. You think that's just the sheer number of plays. You're talking like 57 passing plays, upwards of 90 plays they were on the field for. So I don't know if they didn't have the same substitution they would have liked to have. I don't know if they have the same confidence in their depth that they'd like to have. And the big thing that also has to come from that game, I probably should have mentioned earlier, just the penalties. Just the fact that this is a team that still can't line up where they need to, still can't do the very basic fundamental things you do to avoid a flag on a play.
Well, Greg, what do you attribute the little basic penalties that they've had? Why are they making these penalties? Like those basic line formation problems. These are issues that should be resolved back in preseason, if not training camp.
Right. This was week 5, so they should have been through any glitches they had learning a system or getting used to something. Even being on the road, this was their 3rd road game, so there really are no excuses. It's just not knowing where they need to be, not following the detail you need to get through a play. This is lining up in the wrong place, having 2 guys in motion at the same time, celebration penalties that just take a modicum of restraint after you score to avoid those. So I do think you'll see improvement in that area. When we have 15 flags for 113 yards, it's not hard to improve there. But they need to get back to being a team that has an attention to detail and knows what they need to do on every play.
Greg, I want to get your assessment of this. And I said this on Monday. I thought that the Buccaneers were the better football team on that field on Sunday against New Orleans, despite the fact of 155 yards of penalties or whatever it was, and despite the fact of a million drop balls, and despite, you go down the line. I thought they were the better football team. But the difference is that, New Orleans, being in their own dome, finished it off. And I think it probably even surprised them that they were able to finish it off.
Yeah, New Orleans is tough in that building. Sean Payton hasn't lost in that building since 2010. So it's a hard place to go in, even when you jump out to an 11-point lead in the 4th quarter. Even then, I don't know that there was a huge amount of confidence that'd be easy the rest of the way. I think he knew that Drew Brees still had some drives left in him. More than anything else, this was a game of missed opportunities. You think about drop passes on offense, dropped interceptions on defense, big gains that were negated by silly penalties. So as much as they had a chance to win this game, they also had a chance to be in control much more than they were. So I think that's how they kind of look back on this is if they had done things the right way, it wouldn't have been an issue at the end of the game.
Greg, for the 3rd straight game, the Buccaneers held to under 70 yards of rushing on the game. We all know this offense is based on the running game. What is going on here? Is this an offensive line problem? Is this a Doug Martin problem? What is going on with this running game for the Bucs?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit of both. We wrote about that in yesterday's paper. They have touted themselves as being a run-first offense. This is where it starts, and that opens up the path. And they really haven't done that with any consistency at all. I mean, obviously Bobby Rainey had a great game against the Rams, went for 144 yards there. But I mean, Doug Martin has the lowest average of any NFL running back that's getting more than 12 carries a game. He's looking at 2.5 yards a carry. Bobby Rainey's certainly been a little better in terms of yards, but he has 3 fumbles, so you still don't trust him the way you'd like to trust a back there. So they need to have one of those two step up and be more consistent. I think the line has made a big step forward. The offensive line has made a big step forward in pass protection, in keeping Mike Glennon upright and safe, and I think they need to take the same step here in the coming weeks with 2 straight home games sandwiched around a bye and get the running game going the way they want it to.
And of course, they got Baltimore coming in on Sunday, Joe Flacco and company coming in, Stevie Smith's coming in. That scares me because we know what he did against this football team when he was with Carolina. And yet the Buccaneers are only 3-point underdogs in this game. So perhaps maybe we're not the only ones that are seeing progress being made with this football team, because if I looked at it the way Baltimore's playing and the way the Buccaneers are their record, that you would think the spread would be at least 5.5, maybe 6 points.
Oh, sure. Well, and the fact this game is Tampa, that helps things out a lot. They'd probably be a touchdown underdog or worse if the game were in Baltimore. But no, I think there has been flashes of promise for the Bucs in these last 2 weeks, especially in the Pittsburgh game, obviously. Baltimore has kind of been an up and down team, too. I mean, I think they've run the ball very well, especially when you consider that they've played this year without having Ray Rice in their backfield. So I think more than anything else, they have to find more of that same offense and then some if they want to keep up with Baltimore.
Yeah, let's face it. Joe Flacco is not a quarterback that you do not want to put pressure on, because this guy can wing it. He's got a great arm.
Very underrated arm, I think.
And I can tell you that I know Deshaun Golston was talking about him. He said that it scares the safeties. I mean, he's going to go deep and he's going to try to find Stevie Smith. And I know Smith has got to be geared up for this. So the key every week is in a cover 2 scheme is the front forward pressure. And that is something that the Buccaneers are lacking. And until, Greg, they get that, I think we're going to get these type games where we're not sure what's going to happen. They may go down to the wire when, in fact, that they should be stopping teams like they should have against New Orleans on a 3rd and 10 and a 3rd and 9 in overtime.
Yeah, you guys talked there before I got on just about the lack of pressure, having 0 sacks last week against Drew Brees, despite him throwing as much as he did. And you're right, they're going to have to do that to get to Flacco. Flacco's a big guy. He's hard to bring down. You look over his NFL career, he's only had 4 touchdown passes in a game once, and that came in his only game against Lovie Smith when Lovie was with the Bears. So Lovie's got to do a better job of getting pressure on him through this front 4, and hopefully that'll lead to the turnovers they were able to get last week like they got against New Orleans.
Greg, real quick, give us an injury update. We were just talking before you came on. Mason Foster back to full participation. We expect him to play. But what about Vincent Jackson? What about Jonathan Banks?
Yeah, those are the 2 big question marks, and the 2 guys that have missed the last 2 days. We didn't get Lovie Smith today. He's out of town because his father-in-law passed away. But Leslie Frazier had certainly an optimism about him, about both Jonathan Banks and Vincent Jackson. Banks has a kind of a sore neck from Sunday's game. Vincent Jackson is battling a rib injury. Those are 2 tough guys that have played through injuries before. So he would be surprised. I would be surprised if they're not out there on Sunday. It is a big thing for them to get them back, I should say, at least in a limited capacity tomorrow. That's kind of the last full day of practice, getting ready for Sunday.
All right, Greg, as always, we appreciate you joining us here on the Plank Report. It's great to have your insight. And who knows, maybe Thursday when we come back the following week here on the off week, that we may be talking about a victory over Baltimore. Maybe.
Well, excellent. We'll see, guys. Thanks again for having me.
Okay, thank you. Greg Auman from the Tampa Bay Times joining us here, the Buccaneer beat reporter. As always, we appreciate his insight. Pigskin Picks.
Yes, let's go right to it. So far, we have a few little change-ups here in the standings. Thomas Lipinski of Spring Hill, Florida, scoring a 37 out of our viewers online. But he's still trailing Evan O'Sullivan, who is our producer's husband, and then our own Dennis Phillips. He has 48 points. Evan O'Sullivan, 46. You have 5 minutes up until game time of each week to set your picks and to go ahead and possibly win a prize, too. And this is how you get in touch with us. You know the number on the screen, 813-367-0171. We're taking your phone call. So you have an opinion, you have a take on the Buccaneers this week. Do you think they'll win? Do you have anything that concerns you? Tom and I will talk about it. We want to hear from you. And then, of course, there's our Twitter handles. You can reach us there online as well. And use the hashtag #ThePlank.